Welcome to For the Record. I'm Janelle Hall. We're focusing on a health-related incident that can cause you to lose your license in an instant for months. For Pennsylvanians who have epilepsy or have experienced a seizure, that's exactly what can happen. The number of our neighbors this impacts could be greater than 200,000. Until recently, Pennsylvania state law required many patients to go 6 months without getting behind the wheel before they could drive again. But that rule has changed. Today, I sit down with a Pittsburgh doctor who helped lead that effort to change the law. She shares why medical experts say going from a 6-month to a 3-month driver's license restriction is actually backed by decades of research. She explains how the new rule could give patients more independence while also keeping others on the road safe. Let's go now to my sit-down interview with Dr. Andrea Sinowick, the Vice Chair for the Department of Neurology at Allegheny Health Network. Andrea, it's great to have you with us this morning. For people who aren't familiar with what epilepsy is, tell us a little bit about the diagnosis and what patients experience.
Sure. So epilepsy is a brain disorder. It's a chronic neurologic disorder where someone's brain has a tendency toward seizure. Seizure is an abnormal electrical discharge in the brain that makes a person unable to control parts of their body. So it can be kind of scary.
Yeah. So, and there are different levels of seizures. Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the changes with the driving restrictions here in Pennsylvania.
Sure. So we tend to think about seizures as something that makes a person's body shake all over. But there's a bunch of different types of seizures. Some people have a seizure disorder where they just sort of space out and can't think or can't respond. The characteristic of seizures can be different for different types of people, and some people have different types of seizures even within their own epilepsy.
And some people may not realize, but for someone who has epilepsy, there come changes and restrictions with regard to their driver's license. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. So epilepsy is a real problem for people who have that disorder because they can't predict frequently when they're going to have a seizure. So they may feel fine, have a normal day, and all of a sudden a seizure comes on and they're unable to control what they're doing. So you can imagine there would be a lot of things potentially that you would not want to be doing if you're suddenly going to lose control of your body, like working on a roof or driving a car. When those things occur, then we medically give recommendations that there be restrictions so that people don't hurt themselves or others, and driving is a big part of that.
So in addition to your role at AHN, you also serve on a board for PennDOT. Explain how that works and why they work to team up with physicians.
Sure. PennDOT has a medical advisory board, and it's composed of a variety of different people, including multiple types of physicians. So there's a cardiologist, an ophthalmologist, there are police officers and legal experts, and just a multidisciplinary group, which is really neat because it gives PennDOT the opportunity to look at their regulations in a holistic way and make sure that they're being responsible to keep everyone safe.
And tell us about your role on that board with PennDOT.
Absolutely. So I was appointed as the neurologist on PennDOT's medical advisory board back in 2020. So I have the opportunity to speak to regulation changes or to advise or alert, in this case, that there may be some regulations that are out of step with the current guidelines.
So talk about the current guidelines for, well, talk about what the guidelines have been for epilepsy patients in Pennsylvania and the change that many people may not realize now exists.
So state by state, there are driving restrictions, and these are really governed individually. Some states restrict patients who have epilepsy to drive for 3 months. Some states it's 6 months. There are states that still restrict driving for 12 to 18 months after a seizure. In the state of Pennsylvania, it's been 6 months for a long time. But the regulations from the American Epilepsy Society and the American Academy of Neurology have suggested that that really is too long and that 3 months is a better time period.
So when did Pennsylvania make the change? And do you find with your patients or people that you talk with, do they know that this change has been in place?
Sure. So back in 2020 when I joined the board, this was one of the things that we brought up immediately, which is that this really needs to be looked at because the state's regulations are not in line with best medical practice guidelines. It has taken now more than 5 years to get that regulation looked at and to, in a multidisciplinary way, come up with a better regulation. And that finally made its way through all of the processes and came to be as of March of this year. So as of March, instead of 6 months off the road after a seizure, someone who has a seizure or a seizure tendency and has a breakthrough seizure has to stay off the road for 3 months.
What kinds of experiences have you had when you see patients realize that that change is now in place?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of patients don't know. This sort of quietly made its way through the regulatory change process, but it's been a big problem for a long time. You can imagine if you have a seizure tendency and you've got good control of your seizures, and then all of a sudden you have a breakthrough seizure, and if you tell your doctor about it, you're going to be off the road for 6 months. That means you may lose your job. You can't get your kid to school. You can't go to church. I mean, you lose so much freedom, and that is such a huge and onerous problem that it limits patients telling their doctors the things that the doctor needs to know to keep them safe. And so ultimately, my hope is that as this regulation has changed, patients become more comfortable getting the medical care that they need, which ultimately keeps everyone safer.
And so speaking of safety, for people who may say, well, is it safe for someone who experiences seizures to be behind the wheel? You would say what to them?
Yes, so there has been a lot of research looking at this. Those two big thought leadership guideline statements that were made were based on an accumulation of data that really suggests that 3 months is an optimal time to be off the road after a seizure. So it takes someone out of that high risk window off the road, so that's good. It also allows for someone not to be off the road so long that they either don't pay attention to the regulations and just drive anyway, or avoid telling their doctor about maybe medication changes that need to be made so that they can be safe.
Why is it so important that patients communicate with their doctor and that they know about these seizures? What can happen if you don't get the proper care?
So for someone who has epilepsy, that can be a disorder that changes with time. The need for types of medications or doses of medications, throughout the lifespan can potentially need to be adjusted. And without that good communication with a physician, you might not be getting the optimal care, and you might end up having more seizures over time.
So for someone who does have a seizure, maybe this is maybe they were diagnosed later in life with epilepsy and they have a seizure. What happens when they come to you or another doctor and say, I have it? Is there a change on their license? Is it the record? How does that work that maybe law enforcement would know that they're not supposed to be on the road for that period of time?
Sure. So that's another part of the state laws. In Pennsylvania, there is mandated physician reporting of seizures, which means if you have a seizure in the community or at home and 911 is called and you go into the ER, that emergency room doctor has to tell the state that you had a seizure. So pretty automatically that paperwork is sent, and the state then sends a letter with forms that have to be filled out. This regulation means that the forms have changed, just slightly.
And then, so those forms are then, for instance, if a police officer saw that vehicle, they would be able to pull up that and they would be able to see that record, and that's how they would know.
That's right.
Who shouldn't be on and off. Right. What are some personal stories that you've heard of people who have been negatively impacted by not being able to drive as a result?
Sure. I mean, gosh, there are so many. I think specifically of a young mother who is a single parent, 2 kids at home and working a full-time job, drops her kids off at school, goes and works. She has a single income and comes home and picks them up and does all of these things. In a setting where she loses her job or she loses her license for 3 months, Uber is expensive but not terrible. She can kind of cobble things together to make a patchwork of community members who's willing to help her. When it was 6 months in this situation, this is a person who would lose their job and sometimes end up in a place where now in a more permanent way, she can't provide for her family.
So this change is going to be life-changing for a lot of people.
It's going to be huge.
Yeah. What's the main thing that you want everyone to know, I guess, with regard to this topic and this change?
Yeah, number one, I'm really proud of PennDOT and the work that they've done with their medical advisory board. I think It's a government agency, and so sometimes there's regulations, they feel outdated, they're slow to change, but they are changing. And that willingness to be flexible and to look at things and adjust so that people can have the freedoms that they need, I'm proud of that. The other thing I just want to make sure people know is that it is different now, that 3 months off the road is an important safety measure for a person who has a seizure and for the community, and 3 months off the road is not 6 months, and it's not 12 months. And so you can go to see your doctor, tell them about what happened, get the medication changes that you need, and still hopefully not have such a lifestyle impact that that you have to not get the right kind of health care.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably, I was thinking about that from like through the eyes of someone with epilepsy, even trying to go across the country or on a vacation, would they have to research the rules state by state as they say make their way down to Florida or across the country?
Yeah, so it has a lot to do with licensure. So the licensure, the state that you're licensed in is the one that controls your license. But people who have epilepsy look at these state laws very seriously when they consider where to move. So Pennsylvania becomes a more desirable place for someone to relocate if their laws are reasonable and up to date, as opposed to outdated, too onerous to really allow for someone who has that medical condition to live in the state and feel comfortable that they can be successful here.
It's interesting sometimes when I interview doctors and physicians, I'm curious what made you pick this field, knowing that there was a lot of options when you went through medical school. Is there a personal story or connection behind this particular field?
Yeah, so I am one of 3 kids. My siblings both have disabilities, and they both have neurologic disabilities. One is a little bit more severe than the other, but so I watched as a child all of these doctors interact with my family, and there were great doctors, and there were doctors that I thought, that feels bad to me, and I thought in looking at all of the different medical specialties I could go into, neurology has a lot of mysteries and needs a lot of empathy and communication, and I love it. I'm glad.
This must be a pretty personal milestone for you too then, to be able to.
It feels like a big deal.
Yeah. How many people are impacted by this disease?
So it's about 8 or 1 in 8 to 10 people will have a seizure at some point in their life. Okay. So if you have 1 seizure, that doesn't mean you have epilepsy. It does mean that the regulations apply to you, because the regulations are about seizures. So you can have a seizure tendency and have a lot of seizures throughout your life, or you might just have 1 or 2. But if you have a seizure, because of that unknown, will there be more? When will the next one be? These regulations come into play.
So this law doesn't just apply to people who are diagnosed with epilepsy.
So anyone who's had a seizure, the question then becomes, is this the first seizure of a seizure disorder? And because of that unknown, these regulations help guide whether a person is safe to get back on the road and when they would be safe.
Keep it here on For the Record, because coming up later in the show, I'll share this week's final word with my last question on this topic, all about the help that's available for our neighbors who've been diagnosed with epilepsy or a seizure disorder. Welcome back to For the Record. Before we get to this week's final word, I want to stay on the subject of epilepsy, which has become an issue so many in the Pittsburgh area have come out to support. In fact, just this past June, it marked the 38th annual Family Fun Run and Walk for Epilepsy, which was held at PNC Park. This year's event raised more than $104,000 to help support people who are living with this condition. The event included 982 participants registered and 98 different teams. During the 2025 event, Pittsburgh's Action News 4 spoke with the president and the CEO of the Epilepsy Association of Western and Central PA about the success they've seen.
I want them to know that the donations do a lot to help people. We provide things like emergency medications. We do a lot of work in the schools with kids. I want them to know that they can continue to donate to this event. They can go to our website and donate online even after the event.
And that's still true today. We've provided a link on our website, WTAE.com, and the WTAE app. You'll find it under the For the Record tab in this article for this week's episode. In the meantime, For the Record continues next with this week's final word. Welcome back to For the Record. Right now, I want to go back to my interview with Dr. Andrea Sinowick, the Vice Chair for the Department of Neurology at the Allegheny Health Network, for this week's final word, as I ask her about the hope for people with epilepsy or a seizure disorder. For someone with epilepsy, it might be a scary situation for them to first learn of that diagnosis. What would you say to provide some hope and maybe some insight on the care that is available?
Yeah, so epilepsy or any medical diagnosis can be a really big event in someone's life. The majority of people who have epilepsy find a medication or a combination of medications that works, and the risk of seizures goes back down to near the normal population risk of seizures. There's a smaller percentage, about a quarter of patients with epilepsy who the medications don't work for. And that's a really difficult situation. The good thing is, for people who fall into that category, there are a wide variety of additional treatments. Here in Pittsburgh, there's great epilepsy centers. We have one at AHN that offer curative surgeries for epilepsy. And so I think the important thing is, don't be afraid and be alone. Go find a great doctor, talk through all your fears. There's such a variety of treatment options available. It's not like it used to be.
And we want to thank Dr. Sinowick for taking part in today's discussion. You're watching For the Record. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to For the Record. If you have a topic you would like us to address, please send us an email to news@WTAE.com. You can also rewatch this episode or any episode with the Very Local app on your smartphone, tablet, or smart TV. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you have a good week, and we'll see you next Sunday morning at 11 a.m.